Today on Church Public, we have California banning gas cars and also, at the same time, telling people to not charge their electric vehicles over the holiday weekend. Also, the Satan Club wants your children to join after school, which is nice. We'll look at the latest in sports progression, and there are some interesting instances of this, and a few other stories along the way. Thank you for joining in today. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Welcome back to Church Public. I am your host, Matt Odegaard, as always. And if you are listening on audio, I love you and thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If, for instance, on this particular episode, you want to see some of the pictures that I will show today, you can navigate over to churchpublic.com/podcast and see the video of this because it might be interesting. And I'm telling you, a picture is worth 1,000 words for some of these. But anyway, we'll go through it. I'll try to describe it as best I can for you audio listeners. Again, I really appreciate you. If you like this, hit the like button and subscribe and give it a 5-star review if that means anything. And if it is helpful to you, share it with a friend. My goal here, as always, is to help people follow Jesus and live in the public square. Go out your door and still be a Christian. And more in this day and age, it seems like that's kind of a tricky thing to do. So I want to help you with that. And as we're going through that, what we'll do is examine current events from a Christian perspective, because I'm just not seeing a lot of people do that. There's a lot of conservatives out there. I appreciate them. There are a lot of other news media people out there. I less appreciate their perspective, but I want to bring this into a Christian perspective from the Bible. I'll try to get back to the Bible as much as I can, though, as always, some of this is going to be my opinion. You don't have to agree. You can disagree. You can disagree and throw your phone out the window if you want to. I wouldn't advise it, but you can if you want to. And as always, you can check my work by reading the Bible yourself, which is ultimately my goal. I don't want you to believe me per se. I want you to follow after Jesus. And we access that directly through his word. All right, without further ado, let's get to some of the stories of the day. Okay, so the first story here is that California, I was going to say they've gone insane. That's really not news at all. But anyway, here's what California's did. You probably heard this first part, that in 2035, they have said there's no more gas cars. No more gas cars can be made or sold in California. That is the apparently new rule that they have put into place. And just a few days later, the dates are highlighted on here. The first one is, I think it says 8/25. Second one is 8/31. So literally just a couple days later, Californians are told to not charge their electric cars over this Labor Day weekend because, well, there's just not enough gas in the tank, as it were. So I'm reading through the bulletin. I don't even think I'll bore you with the details of this bulletin. You can go and read it for yourself. And the California ISO is the heat bulletin that they have here. Again, I'm not sure it really makes that much difference to you, but I'm reading through the bulletin, and it says starting tomorrow through Tuesday, California is going to be extreme heat. So, in other words, limit your charging. It says from noon to 10 each day, limit your charging. So, yes, buy an electric vehicle. I mean, great. If you can do an electric vehicle, that'd be fantastic. The only problem is, apparently in California, you're not going to be able to charge it, which is sort of a thing, since that's probably why you wanted it in the first place. At any rate, that's really all I want to talk about that story. I just thought it was, I guess you'd say, ironic, isn't it? All right, let's move on to Satan? Gosh, where are we going today? Anyway, this is the After School Satan Club. Yes, this is a real thing. Sad to say, this is a story out of good old Pennsylvania. So welcome to Pennsylvania. The leader of the Satanic Temple, this is according to ChristianPost.com. Article is titled Satanic Temple Planning to Host Satan Club on Back to School Night. Great. So the leader of the Satanic Temple says that they say that the First Amendment protects his organization's right to host a back-to-school event at a Pennsylvania high school. After school club at Northern High School in Dillsburg will be allowed to meet after approval by officials from the Northern York County School District. I'll skip through a bunch of this. It doesn't really matter. But here's a disclaimer from the district. You'll appreciate this. Quote, the district does not endorse the activity of any outside organization that rents our facilities, nor are those entities permitted to use the school district's name or logo, end quote. As if that makes any difference. I mean, we're talking about the Satan Club here. I mean, this is, I don't know what to say. Just get your kids out of school, people. It's not getting better. All right. Let's continue on. I want to get to some of these other stories here, so we're gonna run through a few quickly. We've got some stories about the border, and we've got some stories about, well, we're back to eating bugs. Unfortunately, we're gonna have to talk about eating bugs again, which I wish we didn't have to do, but it is. Anyway, for those that are interested in things like sports, we have some sports updates. So, I'm just going to show you some pictures and we'll talk about sports updates. So here is, well, again, if you're just listening, I will try to describe as best I can what is going on here. So this is the trans golfer who is winning all of the golf matches against his female opponents in the LPGA, that is, ladies PGA qualifiers. What do I say about this here? I'm trying to read through this article for anything that is actually interesting. The LPGA has now, or could, this is the quote, the LPGA could soon find itself with a biological male holding a tour card if transgender golfer Haley Davidson, and again, if you're not watching, it's basically everything you think it would be, Haley Davidson can stay well at the professional women's golf qualifying tournament. Davidson, who has 3 professional tournament wins, including one that netted $500, finished round 1 of this is a bunch of golf gobbledygook, the LPGA Epson Tour qualifying school stage 1 at 2 under 70. That puts Davidson in great position against 310 females. I'm actually editing this in real time because it says biological females, but I sort of refuse to use that language now because a female is a female. You shouldn't have to say biological because a female is a female and a male is a male. Anyway, so 310, the article says biological females who are attempting to advance to compete for LPGA, card in December's Q Series tournament. I'm going to skip some of this detail in regards to some of the LPGA details. It doesn't really matter to me, but yeah. So once again, this is a man playing golf in the women's division and apparently almost winning it all. Let's move on from this one and go to skateboarding, because why wouldn't we go to skateboarding? So here is, if you're not watching, this is a trans skateboarder who has won in a competition. This is from a couple of months ago now, but I've had it in my queue, and I just decided to combine all these things together because sports, I guess. Anyway, here is an article from Fox News. Trans skateboarder, 29, that's 29 years old, defends besting little girls in competition. The age thing doesn't really count, according to Ricky Trez, who competed against 4 girls under 17 in a New York City skateboarding tournament. So if you are not watching, again, this is the leaderboard for the women's final results from this skateboarding competition. The first place is Ricky Trez, age 29. Second place is Shiloh Katori at age 13. Yes, a 29-year-old man beat a 13-year-old girl in skateboarding, and I just I just don't know what to say about this anymore. Like, how are more people not saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't let adult males compete against female children in sports? I seriously got nothing. I got nothing on this. And I'm not even going to say anything else about it. You make your own decision. Again, this isn't about me. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to believe anything I say. Go and check out these articles and these stories for yourself. But a 29-year-old man who now identifies as female, according to this article, has beaten a 13-year-old girl in skateboarding. So, go sports. I hate to have to do this, but I gotta do one more, and this is the one. I mean, the other ones you need to see because, again, in these 3 things, if nothing else, the picture is worth 1,000 words. When you see these, humans, men, whatever, and the way they look next to some of the girls. But this is I hate to do this. This like hurts my heart a little bit, but we're going to go to my favorite sport, surfing. And this is a surfer who, I mean, I got a couple articles on this, and one in the surf community article, a surf magazine that I read. The title is LGBTQ plus community jubilant as world's first competitive trans surfer destroys opposition to win one-sided women's longboard contest, becomes first surfer in history to win men's and women's division. Now, to be fair, this is a rather sarcastic article, but I think they summarize that pretty well. So let's just look at this picture. And again, if you're not looking, it's a man riding a surfboard in a woman's wetsuit. I don't know what else to say about this. I just don't know. Reading from this article on Beach Grit, surfing's first competitive transsexual surfer Sasha Jane Lowerson has continued, this is the article speaking, her dream run through the women's division of the Western Australian longboard titles, winning the Open Gals crown easily. Lowerson, 43-year-old blonde, who has, I'm going to skip some of this, it doesn't really matter. In 2019, known as Ryan Egan, before transitioning, also won a couple of things. I'm not even going to get into the details of this. I mean, this is where we are, people. And the sad part, and why I bring some of these out, is these are some of the sports I like. Skateboarding, surfing. I'm not so much into golf, but again, like, why are we doing this to women, to little girls? Like, can we just stop this already? Stop this insanity? But apparently this is where our culture is, and therefore this is the things that we have to do and deal with and figure out, like, what is really going on in this crazy world. All right, so we're going to move on from sports. I hope you enjoyed that sports segment. I cannot guarantee I will do sports ever again. I probably will, but you all know, many of you who know me, sports is not generally or necessarily my thing, but some of these sports I think are interesting, so we got to talk about them because, I mean, these dudes, many of them old, like 40s, this 29-year-old, they're just, I don't know what else to say, erasing women by pretending to be women and then beating them at their own game and their own competitions. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like we've got to do better, people. We have got to do better. All right, let's continue on. And this one, so we're getting a little more political on this one. I don't know if you like that or hate that, but this is the direction we're going right now. So there are two tiers of justice. I have talked about this before. We've talked about district attorneys that are paid for by some on the left and therefore have decided that they're going to interpret justice. We talked about that a little while ago in New York. I have seen it in articles across the country. I'm not going to look at very many of them today, but it's important to note that that is in fact happening. There are district attorneys that either who were elected through generous donations by members of the left wing in this country, or have gone through the academic institutional conglomerate and come out saying that the only way to actually do justice is to have two tiers of justice. That literally is what they view. In that, if you are oppressed in some way, you deserve more chances and you don't necessarily need to follow the laws. Whereas if you are an oppressor, then more laws apply to you and you get harsher consequences for lesser crimes. These are the two tiers of justice. And we're seeing it more and more, and we're seeing it play out. And now we're seeing it play out in weird ways because ultimately this road doesn't lead to a good place. It doesn't lead to a place of truth, justice, and the American way, as we used to talk about it, or life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or property, as Thomas Jefferson would have said it in the Declaration. It cannot lead there because if we're giving two different tiers where if you're a certain person, you get a certain amount of justice, or if you're another person, you get different justice. If we literally have these two tiers, these two tracks of justice that the country is going on, we cannot end up in a place where we all feel like it is fair. It's just impossible. Quick example. If you have two children and one of them doesn't do things wrong, but you punish them constantly, and the other one does things wrong all the time, but you don't punish them at all, imagine how they're going to turn out. You can imagine that in that 5-second analogy. And that's the reality of how we're treating certain people in this country. That doesn't end well. It doesn't end with justice. It doesn't end with fairness. It doesn't end with this, quote, equity outcome that the left would have you claim this is really what it is all about. It just doesn't end there. It never does. It never will, because real justice, and I'm going to point to the Bible again, I've got it right next to me here, biblical justice is biblical justice, and biblical justice is flat. And what I mean by that is, it doesn't matter if you're a king, it doesn't matter if you're a peasant, it doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what your circumstances are or how you grew up. The only thing that matters is, what have you done? And if you have done something that is against the law, you get punished accordingly as to the law, whatever the law states. We have judges, we have prosecutors. Sure, they all should do their jobs and follow the laws that are in place so that you have one tier of justice. You have justice that is blind and that judges not based on any external or even internal circumstances. The only thing to judge is what you did. Now, of course, there's other circumstances, which is why you have judges, but you can't have these two tiers that have been created. It just is creating chaos, and it's creating this sense of unrest. And if you have these ideas and you have these feelings that people have been having that we're living in a place, a country that's just not fair, more of this will lead to more of that. More two-tier justice will lead to more of a feeling of unfairness. It will lead to a feeling of, well, I can't get ahead anyway. And ultimately, this is my fear, it will create the very thing that they think is really happening. In other words, if you push somebody down long enough and you tell them they're bad long enough, eventually they may just become bad, because what's the difference? You're going to call me bad. You're going to call me names. You're going to call me all the ist names anyway. Why don't I just become that? That's terrible. I would say to you, please don't do that. But we're going to see more and more of that, because what other option do you have? The justice system clearly won't judge them justly. Now, today we're looking at a little bit different circumstance, but it illustrates the same point. Because, as you know, or maybe not, foreigners need a special medical procedure. I'm trying to guard my words so I don't get kicked off all the socials, but I probably will anyway. Anyway, foreigners need a special procedure if they fly into America and land there. This is just the laws, quote unquote, of America currently. Foreigners who land in America need to have this special medical treatment in order to enter America. However, if a foreigner just walks across the southern border, they don't need any special medical treatment. They may not need medical treatment at all. They may, in fact, be put on buses or airplanes and sent across the country to await some kind of judge appearance that most of them don't show up for anyway. And by the way, we just passed the largest amount of illegal immigrants coming across the southern border of all time. It continues to ramp up, and it is an actual huge problem. But the point of issue here today is foreigners who land in an airplane need this special medical treatment as a government rule, but those walking across the southern border do not. So Peter Doocy, apparently the only one who's asking any actual questions in these press briefings, talks about this, and I think it's fairly fascinating. So let's listen to this.
Somebody unvaccinated comes over on a plane. You say that's not okay. Somebody walks into Texas or Arizona unvaccinated. They're allowed to stay. Why?
But that's not how it works. Like, we actually, no.
I know that that's not what you guys want to happen, but that is what is happening.
But that's not, it's not like somebody walks over and that's not how.
Exactly what's happening.
Well,
Thousands of people are walking in a day. Some of them turn themselves over. Some of them are caught. Tens of thousands a week are not. That is what is happening.
So let me just lay out what we have done under this administration. We have installed new border technology and set up joint protocols with Mexico and Guatemala.
So you hear what's going on here, right? We're talking about two different tiers of justice. And like, sometimes I almost feel bad for KJP, but she's not very good at this. I don't know what else to say. Like, she doesn't even, I think, understand the actual policies of foreigners who land on airplanes cannot come into America without this. But foreigners are literally walking across the border every single day in the thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, depending on the day and the location in the southern border. This is just happening. Peter Doocy points this out, and instead, KJP just turns to, well, here are my talking points, and blah, 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 here's some points. But the points don't really regard anything, and they don't, the talking points just clearly miss the point. They don't really have to do with anything that Peter Ducey was asking or pointing out, really, that we have a two-tier justice system. This is the thing. One set of people can do whatever they want, but the other set of people will be punished severely, maybe even eternally. Who knows? This is the way that they view you, and this is the way that they view me. But other people can do pretty much whatever they want. And I could go on and on and on with examples. You probably are thinking of some as well. But this is just the reality that, unfortunately, our country seems to be full force, full speed ahead going down. And again, as a student of history, you don't have to take my word for it. I've recommended books in the past that you can read to read about these things. Like, you should read about history, because when governments start going down this direction and creating two different sets of justice, it just doesn't end well, ever. And this is how you, I'll say it this way. This is how you other people, like, say, well, you're different than me, so I can treat you differently. This is how you get to those sorts of circumstances where it's okay to imprison a bunch of Jews, and then it's okay to just disappear a bunch of Jews off of the earth because they're different people. That's how you get to that kind of thinking. I'm not saying necessarily that we're there, but this is how you get to that kind of thinking. This is how you get to the French Revolution, where the first group of people to go were the priests, the pastors, the religious people, because they said, well, hey, I don't agree with direction you're going. I don't agree with what you're doing. And then they disappeared. It was off with their heads, because you cannot disagree with the way the party goes. I'm concerned. Let's just put it at that way. All right, I'm going to move on to one more story, because this one is weird and gross, and I don't know. We just have to talk about this ridiculousness. So this comes from CNN, and we're talking about bugs again. Why? I really hate talking about bugs. It's not. Well, no, I am. I'm creeped out by this. I'm creeped out by bugs, and we keep having to talk about bugs, and it's just a weird thing. So this is from CNN. This is an article a couple of days ago, August 27th, by Zoe. I'm not even going to try. Anyway, I'm going to call it by Zoe. This article is titled "Mealworm Seasoning: A Scientists Explore Creepy Crawly Flavoring to Satisfy Meat Cravings." I'm not making this up, people. Like, this is real, and it's gross. Anyway, the subtitle of this picture, again, if you're just listening, thank you so much. I wouldn't even suggest looking at this picture. Actually, I'm sorry that I put it up there. But here's a picture of the mealworms, and it says mealworms cooked in sugar may be the perfect ingredient for carnivores and others looking for meaty, protein-rich, sustainable seasoning, according to research by a team of Korean scientists. I'm going to take this picture off because that's about all that I can stand of that. Anyway, so this is the eat bugs because they're good for you, or they're good for the environment, or they'll make the sun god happy, or Mother Earth, or something. It's gross. But and if you want to eat bugs, I don't care. Go eat bugs. I don't think it's a good idea, but you do whatever you want to do. And if you want to watch like the nature adventure people and they have to eat bugs to survive, like, okay, I think that's a different kind of situation. We have farms in America, and we have farmers who are great people, and they love farming, and they're probably more in tune with the earth than most people in America, and they're good at what they do, and they make delicious foods, and I like to eat those foods, especially beef. It's delicious. We should all eat that. Anyway, so what is this really about? Is it really about food? Is it really about the sun monster? Is it really about the fact that if we don't switch over to bugs, the world is going to catch on fire, or we'll all die of starvation, or whatever? And I'm going to say no. I'm going to push back on that and say no. Now, caveat. As a Christian, I do believe that we should conserve the earth. And we're going to talk about that more in a couple of minutes, and we will get to that, because I believe that we are in charge of taking care of the earth. Yes, we should do that. But how we do it and what we do is an entirely different manner. And I think that's the weird conclusion that we get to, and others get to. And for whatever reason, it's just getting wacky, where they're asking us all to eat bugs and be happy about it, apparently. We're going to go back in time just a couple of decades here and talk about a book that kind of changed. It seems like a turning point that changed some of this thinking, especially towards things like bugs and whatever else. So 50 years ago, around 1970, famous liberal named Paul Ehrlich wrote the book called The Population Bomb, that it seems sent leftists around the world into a panic because it said that, population would grow, it would bomb so big that the whole world would die of starvation and whatever. And it led to such atrocities like the one-child policy in China, where untold numbers of children were aborted and killed and left out to die because they were not quote-unquote legal, which is an absolute disaster, among other crazy policies. But the reality is, that was 50 years ago, and it didn't happen. The population has literally doubled since then, and poverty and hunger have actually, percentage-wise, gone down overall. So is this really about food security or food safety or everyone dying of hunger? No, it's not about food. This is about control. It's another thing about control. And really, I'm going to put a spiritual spin on this because this is current events from a Christian perspective, and I think this fits. You can agree or disagree, but this is where I'm going with this. I think this is about the symbol. I think it's about control, but I think it's about the symbol. I think it's about the idea of eating bugs because the idea of eating bugs is the point. Because eating bugs is gross, and no one wants to eat bugs. Of course they don't. I mean, sure, you could talk about some tribes somewhere. You could talk about the people who are starving in the forest and they need to eat bugs to live. That's a different category. What we're talking about is mainstream eating of things like bugs. The left wants you to eat the bugs, not because it's food, not because it's more sustainable, not because it will help farming and save the world from the sun monster or Mother Earth or whatever. No, they don't like Western civilization. They don't like Christian culture. They don't like God. They want to destroy all of these things because all of these things take authority away from them. God, as we've talked about before, is the ultimate authority. And if you can defer to God, then you can say, well, when I pick up my Bible and say this is the Word of God, and I'm going to believe the Word of God over you, who's been around for whatever, 40, 50, 60 years, they don't like that because then you can say, I believe God is bigger, better, more right, more truthful than you, and that takes some of the wind out of their sails. So they want to destroy this. They want to destroy the culture that we live in, and they want you to be part of the cult. They literally want you to eat the bugs and eat the symbol of their beliefs, which in a weird way is just like Christians taking communion and symbolically eating the body and blood of Christ. I know that sounds weird, but I think this is where this goes. I think it is a cult-like symbol that we're asked to do because that indoctrinates us into their cult and then says, I will do whatever else you tell me to do. Think about this. Decades and decades ago, children were not only viewed as a blessing, but they were viewed as a huge economic growth indicator. For instance, if you had more kids, you could work your farm better and produce more. You can make more of whatever product you made as your family business. And I'm not talking about child labor, and I'm not talking about putting kids in factories. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking previous to that. I'm talking about family business that would grow exponentially as your family grew. This was just true. This is why decades and decades and decades ago, people had as many kids as possible because then your farm could work better. You could make more stuff. If you were a shoemaker, you could make more shoes. And again, I'm not talking about other shoemakers that employ child laborers. I'm talking about the family business. If you were a blacksmith, you could make more of whatever blacksmiths make. You see what I'm saying? Children were a blessing, not only spiritually, but physically, materially, economically. Children were a blessing. But now we have switched to the literal opposite of that. Children are the opposite. Children are seen as a draw on your personal, individual empire, your bank account, your livelihood, your travel plans, all of these things. Children are not viewed as a blessing anymore. They're not viewed as a blessing spiritually or literally or economically. They are viewed as a loss. They are viewed as a net economic loss. Couples currently are not having children because they're afraid of the financial burden or they're afraid of angering the climate or I've brought these stories to you. These are real stories where people are getting sterilized on purpose so that they cannot have kids, so that they don't add to the financial issues, so they don't add to the economic issues, so they don't add to the cultural or climate issues. People are sterilizing themselves to do this. But I've also brought you stories that we're not in a population boom. We're actually in the opposite. We're in a population crisis across the globe. Talked to you about Japan the other day, talked to you about Korea the other day, talked to you even about America the other day. We need 2.1 kids for every family to even just maintain the level of society that we have. And in most places, even in America, we're well below that. And so people are afraid of having kids, and they don't have kids, or they wait too long to have kids, and it's harder and harder to have kids. I happen to have a large family, and I can tell you that it's difficult, but at the same time, I am so ultimately, and I would say eternally blessed by my children. There isn't a moment that goes by that I regret any of that. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying children are a blessing, and we should view them as a blessing. We used to structure our entire culture, our entire society, our entire civilization around children and the family, but now we have done the opposite. We have structured our entire civilization around not having children. Instead, we have structured our society around having a career, and having a home, and having stuff, and traveling, and whatever else. But you have to hear this. You have to get to the bottom of this. Where does this end long term? Where does this lead? Well, it literally ends with this generation. If you don't have children, there is no more generation. There is no economy. There is no home. There is no career. There is no life. Children, quite literally, are the future. And without them, our legacy, our values, our beliefs, our faith, everything else about us ceases to exist. We used to know this. We used to structure our whole entire civilization, our culture around this, but we don't know this anymore. We don't do this anymore. We don't seem to care anymore. And this is a problem. We even have government programs that are designed to help single mothers and actually punish couples that stay together. They get less. These are programs that have been around for decades, and they hurt families. They don't help families. And then, of course, lately, we've been talking about abortion provided from corporations, ensuring that mothers-to-be won't have babies and won't miss work. It's all about work. It's all about productivity. It's all about creation of products, but not creation of families, not creation of children, not creation of the very thing that matters the most, humans. Men are demonized as well, and they're either so weak that they have no power or strength to do anything, or at the same time, toxic and authoritative. Both of those things seem to be true simultaneously, rather than a man just being a strong male figure that helps lead and grow his family, community, and beyond. This is the real problem that's going on in all of this weird bug-eating civilization, and really every other issue. We need to focus in on how do we live according to God's kingdom, according to the actual structure of reality and life. Stop pretending that men can be women and women can be men, and there's no difference between them anyway, so what does it matter? We have to actually just say what true things are. And unfortunately, we're in a culture, we're in a time, we're in a season where saying those things is going to get you fired, canceled, kicked off the internets, maybe out of school. Who knows where this is all going to end? But we cannot let the lies overcome the truth, because when God gave us these 10 commandments, he meant them. You shouldn't lie. Why? Because it dishonors relationships, it dishonors God, and we can't live that way. Ultimately, there won't be anybody around if we live that way anyway. We've got to do the right thing and do the next right thing. So what I actually want to end with today is just a really short reminder of who Jesus is and the opposite of this weird bug thing from Matthew 26, because Jesus tells us all about this, and Jesus reminds us why we do the Lord's Supper and why we do communion. This is from Matthew 26:17. I'm just going to read some parts of this. Jesus is preparing for the Passover, and I could talk a long time about why that is significant and what it means as a Jew, and then how he took this Jewish festival and turned it into this first Christian idea of the symbol and the sacrament that reminds us of what Jesus has done for us. But I'm going to save you the time on that right now. Maybe I will do more of that later. But I'm going to jump down to verse 26, where Jesus talks specifically about this. And Paul actually talks a lot about this as well in 1 Corinthians, but I'm going to read it straight from Jesus in verse 26. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he took the cup and gave thanks and offered it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. That's the really important part here, the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now until that day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. And then, of course, I love that then they sung a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives, and the story continues there. But here's the point, and again, Paul talks about this a little bit in 1 Corinthians and some other places that give some more insight into what this means, but Jesus says, eat this bread, drink this cup, this is my body and this is my blood. Now, there are some in the faith who literally believe that every time you have the bread and wine, they're transformed into the literal body and blood of Christ. For most, in at least Protestant denominations, we just believe that this is a symbol of Christ's sacrifice on the cross. He bled, he died in my place. Either way, the point is the same, that this is a sacrament, and what it does, it allows us to understand Christ's covering over our mistakes, over our sin. In fact, just as an aside, many Christians were accused of being cannibals in the first few centuries of Christianity because people would hear this, you're eating blood or you're drinking blood and eating bread or bodies, and people really thought Christians were cannibals. Like, actually, because you read this, you're like, are these people cannibals? Like, what's really going on here? But no, it's not about cannibalism. This is about the sacrament. It's about the symbol. It's about the same thing that the left is trying to get you to do with bugs. It's something that is a little bit weird. It's a little bit strange, but what it does is remind us that Jesus is the sacrifice for us, and that we cannot do it alone. We need the grace of God that's given to us through Jesus, that we receive through faith, and we need that through Christ's body and blood that he sacrificed for us on the cross. My mistakes, your mistakes, my sins are literally washed away by the sacrifice of Christ. This is the Christian sacrament of communion, or some call it the Lord's Supper. Both are fine. Paul tells us in Corinthians that we are to eat and drink this until Jesus comes again. The leftist secular humanist cult wants you to eat bugs for the same reason. They want you to sacrifice yourself to the world or the sun monster or Mother Earth or whatever, so that you show your faith in their religion, and then they have you, and they can do whatever you want. Christianity is exactly the opposite. You eat the bread and drink the cup knowing that Jesus has sacrificed himself for you. Do you see the opposite? It's the same even with abortion. In Christ says, I died for you so that you can have life. Abortion says, you die for me so that I can have life. All of these things switch around life for death. And in Christ, we have life because of who Jesus is. And again, where I started and where I'll end, I am all for conserving this planet. That is a biblical value. We could talk about that more at a later time too, but Christ in Genesis, God in Genesis has given us dominion over the earth, and we're supposed to subdue it, and we're supposed to take care of it. We are the caretakers of the earth, and maybe we haven't done the best job of that, sure. But what is the goal in the end? What's the conclusion? Do we just kill all the babies, kill all the people, kill all the cows, start eating bugs because that's better for the environment? Or do we do what's best for humanity? Because the point of the earth is humanity. God made humans in his image, and they are uniquely, specially, and wonderfully made for the purpose of living and giving glory back to God. We have to get things in the right order, and what the left continues to do is change orders. And even to back up further from the left, this is Satan's whole goal, which is why we talked about this weird satanic after-school meeting. Don't go to that. And don't go down this road. Satan wants to turn everything exactly upside down from where God has it, from where the created order has it, from where the reality of life has it. And we can't agree with that. We have to stand up for the true things. It seems like most people would rather have a planet without all these pesky humans messing it up. But for them, we must pray. We must pray that they find true meaning and value, not just in life, but in humanity, and more so even in God. And I'll end with Soli Deo Gloria. To God alone be the glory. Amen. That'll do it for me today. For Church Public, I'm Matt Odegaard, and as always, keep the faith.